Hello and good evening. I bid to my lecturer, Madam Aisha, my fellow classmates and all the audience that are watching my educational video. Today I'm going to summarize a little bit about the regulation of factory and machinery, Mineral Dust Regulation 1989 in workplace. In this video, I will break the summary of regulation into 7 parts, which are Part 1, Preliminary Regulation, Part 2, Perceivable Exposure Limit, Part 3, Exposure Monitoring, Part 4, Methods of Compliance, Part 5, Personal Protective Equipment, Part 6, Housekeeping, Part 7, Medical Examinations. Before I dig deeper into every part, I am going to give an overview about these regulations. What is Factory Machinery Regulations 1989? The Factory Machinery Regulations 1989 are a set of regulations that govern the control of mineral dust in industrial workplaces in order to protect workers from exposure to harmful levels of dust. The regulations specify the maximum permissible exposure limits of dust particles in the air, the responsibilities of employers and employees, and the measures to be taken to control the dust. Employers are required to assess the risk of exposure to dust, provide suitable protective equipment, monitor air quality, and maintain a safe working environment. Employees are expected to cooperate with their employers and use the protective equipment provided. The regulations apply to various industries including mining, quarrying, and production. Employers are required to assess the risk of exposure to dust, provide suitable protective equipment, monitor air quality, and maintain a safe working environment. Employees are expected to cooperate with their employers and use the protective equipment provided. Moving on to the first part, preliminary. The Factories and Machinery Regulations 1989 may be referred to as the laws that govern these establishments. They will go into effect on February 1st, 1989. All factories where any mineral processing is done must adhere to these regulations. In addition, every occupier who is engaged in any mineral process shall comply with these regulations, wear and make full and proper use of the protective clothing, respiratory protective, and immediately report to their occupier any defect in any. Furthermore, sandblasting process shall not be used in any factory, except with the prior written approval of the Chief Inspector. Next, the second part is permissible exposure limit. In this part, it explains that no employee shall be exposed to mineral dust with free silica less than 1% in weight at a concentration greater than 10 milligrams per meter cube of total dust average over an 8-hour period of 5 milligrams per meter cube of respirable dust. Employee exposure for the purpose of determining whether the occupier has complied with the limits specified in Regulation 6 may be considered to be at the level provided by the protection factor of the respirator for those periods the respirator is worn. If respirators are used to supplement control equipment to comply with the limits specified in Regulation 6 and all the provisions of these regulations have been met. Moreover, exposure monitoring will be the next part 3. Every occupier involved in a mineral operation is required to monitor employee exposure to see if any workers may have been exposed to levels of mineral dust at or above the action level. The occupier shall collect personal samples for full shift or for at least 7 continuous hours, including at least 1 sample for each shift for each job classification in each work area. Besides, an occupier shall conduct an initial employee exposure monitoring for all employees working in a mineral processing area within 6 months from the date these regulations take effect or within 3 months from the day the employee commences work. It is to determine the percentage of free silica by weight in the mineral dust that the employee is exposed to. When a production process control system or employee change has occurred that could lead to new or increased exposure to mineral dust, or in the occupier has any other reason to believe a change that could lead to new or increased exposure to mineral dust, additional precautions must be taken. For part 4, it will be about the methods of compliance. The occupier must use control measures to bring employee exposure to mineral dust below the levels allowed by Regulation 6 and to keep it there. When it comes to any machinery, plant or working area, the control equipment provided pursuant to Regulation 14 must be used at all times while the machinery or plant is in use and for as long as is required to comply with the Regulation 6 restrictions after that. Part 5 will be explaining about the personal protective equipment. There must be provided at no cost to the employee suitable protective clothing or any protective equipment appropriate to the type of work for his and or her use for an employee is employed in a prescribed area. In an area where mineral dust is a concentration exceeding the limits specified in Regulation 6, arising from a mineral process, cleaning or any other process or work is liable to be present in his or her breathing air or in any prescribed work. Equally important in Part 6 is housekeeping. As much as in reasonable possible, all surface in a mineral processing area must be kept clean and free of mineral dust buildup. Compressed air or any other means that could disseminate mineral dust above the limitations stated in Regulation 6 into any employee's breathing air cannot be used for cleaning. In addition, medical examinations will summarize in Part 7. An occupier shall arrange for each such employee to undergo a prescribed medical examination within 6 months from the date this regulation take effect or within 3 months from the day the employee commences work, unless he has undergone a prescribed medical examination within the 2 years preceding such date and therefore at intervals not longer than 2 years, except in the case of an employee who is suffering from an early stage of pneumoconiosis who shall undergo a prescribed medical examination at interval not exceeding 1 year. An example of the application of the Factory Machinery Regulations 1989 in the workplace is a cement manufacturing plant. The plant management must assess the risk of workers being exposed to harmful levels of dust during the production process. They would need to monitor the concentration of dust particles in the air regularly and ensure that the levels do not exceed the permissible exposure limit specified in the regulations. The plant management would also need to provide suitable protective equipment, such as respirators to employees who work in areas where there is a risk of exposure to dust. They would need to ensure that the equipment is properly maintained and that employees are trained in its proper use. The plant management would also need to implement engineering controls to minimize the generation of dust, such as using wet suppression system, dust collection system, and ventilation system. They may also need to adjust the production process to reduce the creation of dust particles. Finally, plant management would need to regularly review and update their risk assessment, control measures, and training programs to ensure compliance with the Factory and Machinery Regulations 1989. In conclusion, the Factory and Machinery Regulations 1989 play a vital role in ensuring the safety and health of workers who are exposed to mineral dust in the workplace. By requiring employers to assess the control the risks associated with mineral dust, the regulations help to prevent respiratory disease and other serious health issues that can arise from long-term exposure. Compliance with these regulations can also improve the overall quality of the workers' environment, leading to increased productivity and job satisfaction for workers. Therefore, it is important for employers to be aware of and adhere to the requirements set out in these regulations to ensure the safety and well-being of their employees. The regulation is designed to protect workers from the harmful effects of exposure to mineral dust, which can cause a range of respiratory disease such as silicose, lung cancer, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease (COPD). These diseases can have serious and long-lasting effects on a worker's health, leading to disability and premature death. I think that's all from me. I hope you learn and earn some new knowledge from this video. See you guys soon. Goodbye and have a nice day ahead.